I mean, I'm all wired up. I look like I'm in the electric chair or something. Well, hello, good evening. I'm really happy to be here with you. I'm very grateful for your presence here. This is our, God knows how manyth annual retreat. 13th, yeah. I don't know if all of you are familiar with me and familiar with what we're doing, but on the off chance that you're not, I want to start out by getting one thing brushed aside very quickly so we don't have to waste a lot of time with it. What we're about here has nothing whatsoever to do with any sacred teachings, with any spiritual aspiration, with any philosophical understandings, with any non-dual experiences, or anything like that. Has nothing to do with religion either. Has nothing against any of those things. You know, sacred teachings and spiritual aspiration and non-dual understanding in religion has nothing against any of those things. It's just not what we're doing here. And if there remains in you any hint of the idea that that's what we're doing here, I would really advise you to, when I'm done talking, come up and talk to me about it so we can get rid of that once and for all. Because otherwise you'll be wasting your time here. What we are about is finding ways and means to bring an end to what we have come to see to be the actual cause of all human discontent with life whatsoever, of all neurotic behavior, of all psychological confusion. What we're about here is putting an end to the cause of all of that. And what I have concluded is the cause of all of that is what I've come to call the fear of life. Not ego, not thought, not desire, not any of that. The fear of life. When I speak of the fear of life, what I'm talking about is what is experienced by most human lives, perhaps all human lives, but most for sure, as the kind of background hum of either present or potential anxiety concerning what's happening within your life. And that hum of anxiety for most of us is always present. We don't always notice it, we don't always attend to it. We have developed over the years a whole array of effective techniques and practices to deny it, to refuse to deal with it, to find some way to escape from it. And the truth of the matter is that nothing whatsoever has worked. Nothing. The thing about the spiritual teachings is that the thing about them that is very strange to me, and those of you who know anything about me know that I have some considerable history in spiritual aspiration and spiritual practice. The thing that's very strange to me about the spiritual teachings is not that they don't work. One would think, looking at them soberly, one would assume that they would never work. I mean, there's an awful lot of what appears to be magical thinking within that whole realm of spiritual aspiration. A whole lot of contradiction as well. So that, except in the cases where we ourselves, like I have been, are fall in love with what seems to be the depth and the beauty and the wildness of the spiritual and sacred teachings, if we approach them with no preparation whatsoever, we would assume that they never worked, that they were really beautiful, that they have a lot of insight into the plight of humankind. They have a lot of insight into what one would think would be naturally satisfying human life. They also have a lot of aims toward things that have nothing to do with human life. But one would think, looking at them without preparation, that they would never work, except as kind of art and the beauty of human expression. So it's not that they don't work that's strange about them. What's strange about them is that they sometimes seem to have worked. That's what's strange. Not that they don't work, but that they almost never work. I think, and I have good reason for believing this, I think that there have been over the years, I'm talking about this because I really want to turn the page. You know, I don't know if you guys know who David Parrish is, some of you do, but I talked to David Parrish the other day. He's part of a small group of people that are working with us to develop ways and means to bring this to the world. And he's in New Jersey, and Sandy was not kind to him. And he was telling me that he was sorry that he wasn't going to be here, but that from what he understands and what he's seen, that these retreats at the end of the year are kind of a summation, kind of a culmination of what we have been talking about and investigating and exploring throughout the year. And he wondered what it was that this retreat would represent as a culmination of what has been going on all year. And I told him, David, what I'd like to see is that this is the retreat where we turn the page on the whole idea that what we're about is spiritual aspiration. This is the time when we turn the page on that whole among us. Not that there's anything wrong with it, or that we want to do away with it, but within this community of people, that we turn our back on that once and for all and leave it behind. It's taken me 13 years to get to the point where I finally am able to speak clearly and directly, to some extent, what I see to be the case and what has happened to me in this life, and what the cause of it is. So that's what I want to see. Back a couple of years ago, we had a satsang. That word is kind of funny now. We had a satsang in Boulder, which I've mentioned before, that ended up with the title, Escape from the Spiritual Ghetto. And that was like 2006 or 2007. Well, what I want is that at this retreat, we complete that escape from the spiritual ghetto and be about the business of actually bringing sanity to ourselves and to our families and to our friends and acquaintances and to the world of humanity at large. That's what I want to see here. When we consider the matter of the relationship between what we're doing here and the spiritual teachings, I really want to make clear that I have nothing against ego. I have no problem with ego. I have none whatsoever. I have nothing against thought. I have no problem with thought. I have nothing against, so far as I can see, anything at all except the fear. The human experience is so broad, so inclusive. The possibility of the human experience is so broad and so inclusive that there is nothing whatsoever can be gained by finding things that are legitimate human pursuits and determining that they're what's wrong, that that's what has to be stopped, whether it's political or financial or spiritual or religious or God knows what else. We have no quarrel with any legitimate, natural human endeavor, not driven by insanity. Nothing. Now, as I said, what I think is the case, what I'm persuaded and convinced is the case, is that the problem in the human community at large, which the face of it is extremely variegated. It has many faces. It has faces of political insanity, faces of spiritual insanity, faces of selfishness and self-service and all kinds of things. The only problem, and this is what I would like to convey, the only problem that afflicts and besets humanity is the fear of life, is some underlying point of view, some contextual understanding, not a explicit understanding or an explicit belief, but some contextual understanding and belief, a point of view that came upon us without warning and without any possibility of us knowing what was happening, that is based on the assumption that there's something wrong with life. Now, that assumption is not spoken or explicit, but the whole foundation, what I see to be the case in my own life, in my own mind, in my own history, and what is proving to be true in the case of more and more people, is that every stupidity, every neurotic arising, every hateful thing, every murderous intent, every fearful drawing away and shrinking away from things, every neurotic understanding of what's occurring in our life occurs in service to that underlying context and point of view, that the assumption that there's something wrong with life, that there's something dangerous about life, something that is dishonest about life, something that tricks us, something we have to watch out for, something that we have to keep all incoming experience at arm's length in order that we can determine whether the experience that's arising is helpful to us, hurtful to us, or of no interest to us. We live our lives at a distance. We live our lives protected by some invisible plastic shield that exists in order to keep us separate from life, lest life swallow us up and destroy us. The psychological mechanisms, the entire personality, the psychology of the entire personality is corrupted and stained with that fear, with the need to serve that sense that there's something wrong with life, so that the whole array of psychological structures that come into being naturally in the course of our lives as a way of understanding and relating to our lives, the only way we have really is that psychology. And that entire array of psychological structures is distorted and contaminated by the assumption that there's something wrong here, and what these structures have to do is protect us from the untrustworthy life, the dangerous and lying life. Once that's seen, I have to say, once that's seen, and I suspect even considered as a possibility, everything about your experience of your life, everything about what's happened to you in the course of your life will be kind of immediately explained. It kind of explains everything. Everything about what seems to be the insanity of the human species will be explained, can be explained by the assumption that it is the the ordinary state of human relationship with life is one of fearfulness and anxiety, of antagonism and aggression. If that's the case, it explains everything. It especially explains my own stupidity, all the ways in which I tried my best to get rid of this life. I think, it's my opinion, that and I don't know this to be true, and it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's my opinion, and I'd be happy to I'd be happy to know the actual cause of this. But what I think is the cause of this is the birth trauma. It's something very simple. It's accidental. It has nothing to do with us. It is for certain that whatever the cause of this is, it's not our fault. It's not anybody's fault. Nobody is at blame for the sorry state of human affairs. Nobody's at fault. Everybody is doing exactly the best that they can possibly do, given the circumstances of the psychological structure that they have to work with. The murderer is doing the best that they can do. The tyrants, the despots, are doing the best that they can do. It's not their fault. They're not to blame. I was always doing the very best that I could do. I am not to fault. I'm not at blame for all of the stupidity, 50, 60 years of stupidity that I inflicted upon myself and on the rest of the world. And you're not to blame for anything that's happened in your life either. These structures are mechanical entities. They're like algorithms. They operate with an underlying mission of protecting me from my life. And the algorithms proliferate and develop and manifest and unfold according to the way circumstances present themselves. So that's what I see to be the cause of all human problems. And if we could rid ourselves of that fear of life, we could rid ourselves of the problem of being human. We could go sane. We have discovered, quite accidentally, sort of accidentally, we have discovered really the act that can bring an end to the fear of life, and anybody that does it. An act that is so simple, whose the harmlessness of which is so self-evident, the insignificance of which is so small. Can insignificance be big? That is overlooked. It's even hard to explain to anybody what this act is in a way that can be heard and understood by the psychology that's hearing and understanding it. The psychology that is receiving it and through which we are understanding our lives and the things that happen to us, that psychology actually naturally would find this suggestion to be either ridiculous, which is a way of dismissing it, or dangerous. It can seem quite dangerous to the psychology. Now, this simple little act, and this is where sometimes the issue comes up of the resonance of what I speak about with spiritual teachings and spiritual aspirations and sacred teachings and so forth, but you can just ignore that. If it appears, just ignore it for the moment. The act that I'm speaking of is what we call looking at yourself. It is an act that is simple beyond belief. It's an act that's so simple that I am of the opinion that if it is merely described to someone cleanly and plainly and simply enough to follow, that listening to it will cause it to happen. Whether the person doing it knows it's happened or not. That just the listening to it, if it's presented correctly, will cause it to happen. And furthermore, this is not like stuff that I'm kind of pulling out of my ears or any other part of my anatomy. This is an opinion that is supported now by a really quite incredibly large and variegated bunch of human beings, who, many of whom, against their own better judgment, have found that the performance of this act actually does have the effect that we claim it does, although not always right in the beginning, but that's another story. What we've come to see is that anyone who performs this act, whether by the automatic performance of it that comes just from hearing it described, or by deliberate and strenuous effort, or by just kind of casual trying it every once in a while in the course of their ordinary life, that anybody who actually, and here's another thing, trying is succeeding. You actually can't fail. This, if you try, you can't fail. I mean, what we're talking about is you. We're not talking about some ethereal being or some, it's you. You're here. It's you. And what we've found is that when anyone tries that act just one time, the deed is done. Not like that, but everything that needs to be done has been done that will cause a profound and radical regeneration of the psychology within the human mind that's done it, and that will eventually produce a sane and satisfying and engaged relationship with life itself. And the previous seeking and yearning for some solution that will get me out of life itself, or will stop me from thinking, or will take away from me my sense of self-consciousness, that all the yearning for that kind of solution to the obvious problem of being a human being just goes away. For some it takes some time, for others not so much. We've come to think that that young people, for example, it doesn't take much for them at all. And I think the reason for that is because they already, here's the thing, right? Young people, not like me or most of the people here, I don't see anybody that I would count as a young person. Young people, if you recall back, young people already know that nothing has worked. They may not know it intellectually, they may not know it explicitly, but when you're young, it's obvious because you have the experience of the world of humanity as it is, and it's absolutely obvious that nothing we have done in the past has worked, unless you've succeeded through aging and the kind of trade-offs and things we make with our idea of how things should be and how things are. Prior to that for us, it can be a little bit difficult. But yeah, because we've already come to accommodation with life. Even if we're still seeking escape from life, we've come to an accommodation with life, with its complication, with its nastiness. But the young have not yet found a way to do that. So when they perform this act, and we know this, we had a guy not long ago who just barely showed up, pulled up, did the looking, and then reported back that he had immediately lost all interest in spiritual teachings, that they just didn't interest him anymore. It wasn't that he thought there was something wrong with him, it's just that their interest departed completely. And that took for him, like, I don't know, a day and a half. It took me 13 years. So I am firmly of the opinion, and we can talk about it, we can argue about it, we can do anything you want, but I am firmly of the opinion that the human mind, and it probably not universally, but close enough to not make a difference. The few who might have escaped it are way swallowed up in the rest of us nutcases who are desperately trying to destroy things. The vast majority of human beings suffer as they do and act crazy as they do as a result of a single cause, which is the fear of life. That's the first thing. The cause of all human problems, all human problems that are human, of human origin, not external problems. There's a lot of problems. Life is full of problems, full of complications and so forth, but the problem of being a human being, that underlying sense of yearning that comes from the feeling that there's something missing here, something not enough, something wrong, something to be careful about, causes all the trouble, all of it. Look at the paper, all of it, every bit of it. And that we have an act that is extremely simple, that seems pretty much so, there may be exceptions, but if there are few and far between, that will always reliably bring an end to that fear and cause a regeneration of the psychology that produces a personality that's sane, engaged, and satisfied with life itself, and no longer needing to steal from you or kill you or do any of the other things that we have done in the past. So, even if you've done this 100 times, let's do it again now. Just once. Let's do it again now. Because this act is all there is to it. It isn't necessary even to talk about the fear of life. If we can get this act out in the world where people will try it, no matter what their reasons are for trying it, it will bring about a profound transformation in the human experience. I'm certain of it. So let's see what this act is that we're talking about. First of all, one thing to see about this act that is actually pretty important is that it involves our capacity as human beings to do one thing. And so far as I can see, and again, this is not necessary for you to believe it or do anything about it, but it's interesting to look at. But so far as I can see, this that we use to do this act is the only thing we have any power over whatsoever, pretty much. This is pretty much all we have choice over. And even then, that choice is not always clear, and it's not always available to us because we forget it. But what we have is the actual ability to choose where we put our attention. We can't do that all the time because attention itself is, and especially among those of us who have not completely healed from the wound of fear, attention itself is hijacked and used by the fear to keep us looking at things out there, what that might be either helpful or harmful to us. And attention naturally, when it's not worked with, attention naturally is drawn to whatever is flashing or noisy or, causing trouble in the periphery of things, and we can't always stop it from doing that. But we can, if we want to, under limited circumstances, we can decide to move our attention from one experience to another experience. And it's really important to see that that's what's happening here. This is not some mystical occurrence that's happening. It is the power that you have to decide unevenly, to decide to move your attention from one thing to the other. For example, as we're sitting here, see if you can't put your attention on the way it feels to be breathing, just on breathing, just on the rise and fall of your rib cage, the way the breath feels as it's coming in and going out of your body. Just notice the fact that you actually can, when I shut up, spend some time focusing your attention. And if you lose focus, you can bring it back, focusing your attention on what it feels like to breathe. Let's just breathe for a minute. And as you breathe, you can see that the breath has a number of parts to it. It has an in-breath and an out-breath. It has a cessation at the end of each in-breath and at the end of each out-breath. And you can see that you can choose one of those markers as the place to pay attention to. I often recommend what I call mindfulness training, because this power over attention is so useful and so useful that it pays to train yourself to be able to use it with more effectiveness than is usually the case, and that involves watching your breath. Noticing what it feels like to attend to something. And now see if you can't move the focus of your attention instead of to the the moving breath to the feel of your tongue as it sits in your mouth quietly. And now, see if you can't find the experience present in your mind of you. What it feels like to be you. Not thoughts, not psychology, just you. What you would call me. Some have found that it's useful to think of some experience in the past, near past, far past, whatever, and that in recalling a experience in the past, it's quite easy to notice that you felt exactly the same then as you do now. And noticing that is looking at yourself. Okay. Now, the actual experience that is the result of this act of looking is at best extremely small, of no significance, of no real consequence. You, the bare naked essence of you, doesn't have much to it. There's not much to attract attention. It's just you. Because of that, because of the kind of uninterestingness of you, it is easy to think that you failed when you try to look at yourself, because it's natural, especially in a mind that is conditioned by the fear, to assume that you must be something really important and something really worthy of attention, since so much drama is constantly coming and going around you. But it's not true. The essential nature of you is the simplest thing in the universe. And if you've done this, if you followed what I said, and if I was skillful enough in my effort to lead you to there, if you've done this, you have done all that needs to be done. I swear, nothing else needs to be done. And what you can expect to occur in the coming days and weeks is, for one thing, you may get kind of disturbed. Things might get kind of crazy. And I think I know why that happens. Another thing is that you, even if you think that, oh, that wasn't anything, I didn't do it, I couldn't, it was nothing. I didn't do that. What are you talking about? You will find, as the days go by, doing it again and again and again. You may think it may occur as a result of your intention to do so. You may even set aside, some have set aside times to try to do the looking and so forth. Or it may just happen kind of off the cuff when you're in the checkout line at the supermarket, or watching a sitcom on TV, or working in the garden. Just kind of oh. But what you can depend upon is that you will do it again and again and again for some time. There will come a time when that ceases, and I don't know whether the repetition has any value, as far as having an effect on anything. But for a while, you will find yourself doing it or trying to do it. You might get frustrated. You might think you're doing it wrong. There's all kinds of things that can come up. But the one thing that you can count on is that you'll try to do it. Another thing is that, especially with a group of people that are, well, not in the 16 to 18 year demo, is that you'll find that the anxiety may get worse. The confusion may really double and redouble. The wildness of things may just kind of drive you crazy for a while. And I think the reason for that is, it's as good a way to put it as any, I think the reason for that is that these psychological structures that have made up our personality when our personality was conditioned by the fog of fear, these psychological structures, and it's not like they're anything really, but we could talk about them as if they are. These psychological structures are beginning to lose their reason for being. They are beginning to get kind of crazy as they get dismantled. That's what I think is happening. But while that is happening, and there's things you can do while that's happening, most of which have to do with exercising the power you have to determine where to put your attention, determine where to focus your attention, and the ability to simply decline to attend to things that don't need attending to, that are nothing but trouble. But the time will come when all of that will pass away, and you'll find yourself with no distance between you and your life. You'll find yourself completely engaged, using the power of your attention, which is the only tool you have. You'll find yourself completely engaged in learning how to be a human being, how to live a human life, how to successfully and effectively and intelligently navigate the craziness of being alive. And you will find it to be frustrating, satisfying, challenging, all the things. It make you angry, make you sad. All those things will be part of the array of human experience that you now will have no protection from, no buffer against, no relationship with, other than the growing understanding and skillfulness in using the power of your attention to effectively work with your life, to have the light of human intelligence actually shine on what's actually happening in the life, instead of being caught up in the fog of fear that previously has dulled it and made it pretty useless. Okay. I could go on talking, but I would just be saying the same things over and over again. Look at yourself. And and the other thing is that in the process of this unfolding, in the process of the diseased and contaminated structures disintegrating and falling away, new psychological structures will begin to appear. A new personality consisting of these new, sane psychological structures will begin to take shape and take form and be your face in the world, be the way in which you have the experience of life as a human being. These new structures, the way in which you have the capacity to use the power of attention to navigate your life and to use the light of human intelligence to make it what it is, which is unbelievably satisfying. Really, it's amazing to me now how I could have spent so much time seeking an end to my mind, seeking an end to self-consciousness, seeking an end to thought, when mind and self-consciousness and even thought is the way in which the light of human intelligence manifests in human beings, in human lives. Okay. So, anybody want to talk to me? We can talk or not. It's up to you. Anybody think this is spiritual teaching? Okay. Yes. Please. Hi.
Hey, John.
Do I know you?
We met once before. Had
Hi.
a talk a couple months ago.
I think I recognize you, yes. What's your name again?
Jim.
Jim. Hello, Jim.
Hi. I almost feel like you're baiting me when you stretch the non-spiritual. And I absolutely agree with you that this is a very secular teaching on how to be fully human. But the teaching on fear is also talked about by many spiritual teachers.
Oh, it is, yes.
And the way to deal with it, like you're recommending, is also talked about by spiritual teachers. But that doesn't make it a spiritual teaching and doesn't stop it from being a very secular teaching on how to be human. It's like nobody's got a corner on the truth, and what I hear you say, I'm with you on every single word until you say that it can't also be presented in a spiritual context.
That's a good question. It's a good thing to talk about.
Yes.
Actually, it is. Here's a couple things to keep in mind, and I understand exactly what you're bringing to my attention. A couple of things to keep in mind is that the spiritual teachings and the sacred teachings in general originated many thousands of years ago, at least 5,000 years ago, coming out of the forests, coming out of the animistic relationship with life that was the way of human beings for tens of thousands of years. And that these teachings arose about 5,000 years ago from within a religious context. That's where they originated, within a religious context. Now, nothing wrong with religion, but what has happened is that 5,000 years ago, and I think that there have been a number of authentic teachers over the years, I don't know much about the current crop, but over the years, who have authentically destroyed the fear in their own life by this same method, but that when they came to us to try to, and it's natural, we're not alone, it's natural to want to bring this to, you know, if you rid yourself of fear, you want all human beings to hear this. Yeah. And when they tried to bring it to us, the only vernacular that they had with which to speak about it was the vernacular of the spiritual teachings, which have a considerable amount of religiosity in them as well. So that, for example, and I think this is true of many of them. I think the Buddha, I think most of the ones that are obviously and inarguably free from fear, got that way the same way that I did. I think that that's exactly what happened to them. I think that they looked, got the direct experience of their own personness, and that was the end of the story. Except that that happened within a context that could not support so simple an idea. So that, and I'm going to shoot forward now to Ramana Maharshi, okay, who is kind of the, to me, a very apt example of what I'm talking about. And he also has the advantage that I know a lot more about him than I know about a lot of others, because like most of what we know about the Buddha is what people said about him 500 years after he was dead, whereas Ramana was with us until 53 or whatever it was. Here's what Ramana did, and this is from the things that he wrote about his own experience. Here's what Ramana did. He was, the fear got big in him because of the death of his father, suddenly and unexpectedly, at the age of 45, I think, when his father was in a town working somewhere else. He, without warning and unexpectedly, dropped dead. This produced in Ramana a kind of neurotic fear of death that stayed with him for a couple of years. And it got, at a certain point, about 2 years after his father's death, that fear of death got so big that Ramana decided that he was going to find out what dying was. And in order to do that, he lay down on the floor and pretended to die. Simple, not a big deal. He lay down on the floor, he pretended to die. He imagined, and he obviously is extremely intelligent, he imagined all of what the processes might feel like in the death of the body. And at one point he even pretended to have rigor mortis. He actually stiffened his joints and his legs and his arms and so forth, pretending to have rigor mortis. He lay there and imagined himself being carried to the cremation place. And through it all, what Ramana himself described as having happened was that he discovered that the only thing that survived was what he called the force of personality. The force of personality. Now that's really kind of shocking. It was shocking to me when I first read of it. I first read it, and it's in Nanyar. It's in the first thing that he wrote, because it seems so not what I was accustomed to. He always insisted that that was what remained. He had, it was a big experience for him. After a couple of weeks, he ran away from home. He borrowed some money and got a train and went to Tiruvannamalai, because he had heard from his uncle that Tiruvannamalai was a temple where there was a lot of big spiritual stuff going on that was extremely important, and that's where real people, you know, it was like close to Arunachala, which is supposed to be where Shiva's hair came down or something. It was a big, big center of spiritual and religious activity. Ramana went to Tiruvannamalai, and he just went into the temple and stopped talking. And he was subjected to some ridicule and harassment by other children that were in the neighborhood and so forth. But he remained steadfast and refused to talk. He later tells us that he indicated to people that he had taken a vow of silence, but in reality he just didn't want to talk to anybody. And he used the vow of silence as a way of making people feel better about it, right? He was befriended by a young man there, and this young man started bringing him, and this was also from Ramana. He wanted to know what had happened to him. He really wanted to know. So his friends started bringing him all of the spiritual books from all of the history in India of the spiritual aspiration for liberation from the misery of being a human being. And it was in those books that Ramana found that it was from those books and those teachings that Ramana took the vernacular from which he tried to tell us what had happened to him. He never succeeded. And he knew that. And as time went on, he fell very silent. He didn't want to talk to people. And the reason for that, as reported by him, was that it was frustrating because he couldn't say anything that was helpful to them. When people would come to him, he would in all cases, he would refuse any thinking of him as a special, yeah.
To clarify, I'm with every word. This experience that he had, where he imagined the whole death process, did it have the effect of?
He looked at himself.
It took away his fear of life.
That's right. It took away his fear of life. He looked at himself, and the fact that it is exactly the same as I am talking about is found in his description of what he looked at to be the force of personality. However, throughout his entire life after that, he was never able to communicate to anybody anything other than that it was vichara, Atma Vichara, the same Atma Vichara that had been brought into being around the campfires of the Aryans 5,000 years previously, the same self-inquiry that is that takes so many forms in the spiritual realm. Self-inquiry takes a number of forms. It takes the form of neti-neti, it takes the form of all kinds of things, none of which explicitly have to do with the experience of the person, all of which are intended to destroy the experience of the person, to reveal the experience of the person to be false, all of which.
My understanding of what you're saying about Ramana, who I know nothing about, read nothing about, heard nothing about, like I said, it correlates with my understanding of lean into fear.
Yes, right.
And look at yourself. I've just heard said many ways, but this is a wonderful
yes, but here's the thing.
Brevity of it in the secular world.
And that's the thing. It's been said many ways, and very seldom have those ways produced any lasting effect on the human beings who hear it. Every once in a while, someone will stumble upon reality, as I did. As I did. I was entirely taken by the non-dual teachings and particularly by the teachings of self-inquiry and Atma-vichara in the manner of Ramana Maharshi. And they produced in me a year of amazing states and amazing experiences and so forth that collapsed, as it must collapse. And it was in the collapse of that I finally actually did the act, even though I didn't know I had done it at the time. Now, that's the problem, you see. That's the problem with, here we have an act that we can see over a long course of history has every once in a while caused human beings to wake up and go sane, right? And we have seen those human beings who it has caused to wake up and go sane come and try to tell us what happened and how we can become as they are. And the best they have ever been able to do, so far as I can see, is to describe to us what it should feel like to be free of fear, what it feels like to live a life of liberation from fear. And what that has done to us is cause us to try to acquire those characteristics as a way of liberating ourselves from the misery of our own lives, when obviously the attempt to acquire those characteristics is just one more project in the purpose of the personality formed within the fog of fear. So that without something more direct, more secular, divorced of what has not worked in the past, now we've got something that works. And we've got something that we can communicate. And it doesn't take somebody who is involved in spiritual aspiration or philosophical investigation or non-dual understandings or anything of the kind. It can be communicated to any human being on the planet. It can be heard and acted upon and have the same effect. The difference is that the vernacular in which these folks in the past have tried to bring it to us is incapable of communicating it. It just is not capable of communicating it.
On the broader, you know much more about scholarly religious teachings than I do. And you know more teachers and names than I do. As I wrote the registration form when I signed up after I've talked with you the last time, the first time we talked was, like I said, the last time I think you had a free Sunday afternoon talk, and I came up to ask a question regarding my experience of how does it feel to be me? Mm-hmm. And I said all the things that I didn't think that it was, and I said all I could come up with if I had to put it into a word was natural. How does it feel?
Yes, right.
As close as natural. I could come to a word. I said if I described a feeling, it's like putting on a perfect fitting fine leather glove.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I was. That's the first time I heard you speak, and everything I heard you say, I had explained to me previously by my meditation teacher. With not quite as much brevity, but as a singular teaching, as a singular event. And I thought that it was amazing that I could have the opportunity in my life to have two different people pointing out the same thing to me. And that's why I said I thought you were almost baiting me to come up here by the stress of this being, not the difference between secular and spiritual, because I've heard the same thing from two people. And I mean, of all the people out there, I just heard the same thing from two people.
Yes, that's fine. And I don't.
Two different formats.
Yeah, right. Except, I will say one thing, and of course I don't know, but you can tell me. To me, the critical difference between the secular approach to this liberation from fear, the key critical difference is the insistence that what we're talking about is you, the person, you, the personal pronoun. And I think that's the biggest difference. You know, in spiritual teachings, the personal pronoun is, you know, kind of icky, right? We don't want that.
I'm not steeped in spiritual
I know
teachings.
that, but
I have my singular experience with somebody who has introduced a meditation technique to me that I found effective in a level of genuineness, and he happens to live present himself to the world, or the world sees him as a spiritual person, and he is a spiritual person. That's the way he was born.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that a spiritual person can't find the authentic genuineness of being a human being.
That's what I say.
And be able to take what they've experienced and find a way to help others have that same experience like you are.
Please let me try to be clear about this, right? I think that for the most part, in the realm of spiritual teachings, that most people who are in the realm of spiritual teachings authentically have the direct and immediate experience of the reality of their own nature, okay? I assume that to be the case. I have nothing against them. I have no beef with them whatsoever.
I understand.
Completely. It's just that what I want is more than what they want. I want this to be shown to every human being in a way that is simple enough that it does not require assenting to any understanding of any kind whatsoever.
Exactly. Joining anything,
That's
subscribing to anything.
That's right.
I'm with you.
That's it. And that's it's not like, oh, the spiritual teachers are all fakes and frauds and part-time broads or anything like that.
No reason for name calling.
Right? It's just that it's a whole different thing. I have no problem with it, but I want to see human beings stop killing one another. I want to see, because I see why we do that, and I see how easy it is to put an end to it. If I can just get to say to every human being, look at yourself, you, just what it feels like to be you, the person, what you call me. If I can say that to every human being I say that who listens to me will find themselves free of the fear.
Your heart and your genuineness, when I met you the first time, is what brought me back here to this retreat.
Yeah. And I'd have nothing against religion, nothing against politics, nothing against anything. Not really, nothing against anything except the fear. I don't think we have any idea what humanity could look like and become and manifest in the world if we were free of this ancient curse of the alienation from life itself.
Absolutely.
You know?
So I wanted you to know that you have a stereo speaker out there that's saying the same thing, because I've heard it from both speakers.
Well, that's fine. That's good with me.
I thought it would be.
Okay. So it's not the spiritual teachings, it's that they don't work.
I don't have opinions like you do of working or not working. Yeah. I happen to have a meditation practice. I happen to know somebody that's taught that practice to me, and that person taught me the same thing that you're teaching.
And it's like I said in the beginning, the strange thing about the spiritual teachings, and this is what we're delving into, the strange thing about the spiritual teachings is not that they don't work, it's that they almost never work. That's the strange thing about them. And that's the thing that I'm trying to explain here in this conversation with you.
What little bit I have read kind of could be summed up like you just said, that how come enlightened teachers don't have enlightened students?
Yeah.
And how come an organization with 10,000 people has one enlightened person leading it?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly the case. And that's the strange thing about it. But the strange thing is that anybody gets anything. That's what makes us attend to them, is because there are people who clearly are free. And there have been for thousands of years, but not many of us, not enough of us. And this is something that anybody in the entire world can hear, act on, and have the results of.
If I had to find one group of people that were able to transmit this historically, it would probably be in the warrior traditions of Southeast Asia.
Possibly.
Not the religious traditions.
Yes, possibly.
The warrior traditions.
But again, you know, that is a special world. Not everybody has access to that world.
Very few people.
Right.
And even though that world has succeeded in transmitting it, it's not with simplicity in a secular sense.
Right.
It's with years of
Yes,
training
right,
and having to step out of society.
Deep commitment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
But I think there's been a long history of being able to transmit it, the freedom from fear.
I couldn't agree more. It's just that it's like yes, I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
But I have a bigger fish to fry.
I'm glad.
Than, you know, little cults of, I don't mean that dismissively, but this is for the whole world. This is for all of humanity. This isn't something that takes, you know, like 108,000 prostrations or I mean, those things are valuable, and there's some value and worth that people get from those kind of activities. But freedom doesn't require that. Liberation doesn't require that. Liberation requires nothing at all except to look at you. Just once. Really, just once. And that's all that's required. And then if you feel like, you know, becoming a samurai or a rainbow body or anything of that kind, go to it, you know, enjoy yourself. It's your life. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to have this conversation because that's what I wanted to do. And I see, that's the other thing, right? I want to put the spiritual teachings where they belong, which is not here. Not here. I want to, our work together has nothing to do with spiritual teachings. And that's what I want to accomplish here this time, in this retreat. I want to turn that page without demonizing the spiritual teachings, without demonizing anything.
I don't feel you demonized any spiritual teachings. And I'm glad you can hear me say that what you're presenting has also been presented in a spiritual context.
It's obvious. I got it through a spiritual, an arduous spiritual path. But I had a special set of circumstances. You know, I was in prison for 20-odd years, and while I was in prison, I had an opportunity that most of us don't have, which is an opportunity to focus fully and completely on something so not accessible to most people who are out in the world earning a living and so forth. So I had a great advantage from that, and I was able to follow a spiritual teacher, Ramana Maharshi, to the end of the road that he was trying to lead us to, and discovered me. Just me.
Well, you discovered the lean into fear that he couldn't effectively put into words and teach others.
That's right. And it took a long time. And so the thing about spiritual teachings is they're wonderful. I love them. I love them all. Really, I love everything. But that's not what we're about. That's not what this is. This is not a spiritual teaching. That's the main thing I want to get across.
This is about how to be fully, authentically, genuinely human.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly what this is.
Absolutely. That's why I came back.
We're on the same page. Okay. I guess we're kind of running out of time here. Anybody have something they really want to talk about? They can't wait. You? No? Okay. Once again, I am so grateful to all of you for being here, and I'm looking forward to our time together over the next few days. And I hope we can start by knowing that whatever we're doing here is not a spiritual teaching. Not that there's anything wrong with it, as Seinfeld once said. Not that there's anything wrong with it. But this ain't it. This is secular. This is human potential. Okay? Thank you all. I'm looking forward to our time together. I'm going to go home now.